In the deep south of Egypt stands one of the greatest monuments of the ancient world. A temple fronted by 4 colossal statues of a single man, staring down the desert for over 3,000 years. But things are not as they seem. This isn't just a temple, it's a trick. It fooled invading armies, it fooled early explorers, and it might be fooling you too. How did and does this ancient marvel deceive the world? I'm going to show you, up close and in person. Welcome to Antiquities Explorer, your guide to historic places. Follow us to different countries as we search for ancient artifacts. If you too wish to explore the ancient past through travel, we'll help you plan where to go, what to see, and how best to enjoy what you encounter. In this series of Antiquities Explorer, you can accompany us on our trek through Upper Egypt, homeland of the ancient Egyptians and Nubians. Come on, let's go. For this journey, I'm doing something different. Usually I go into a country with just my co-host, and sometimes a videographer. But this time, it's not only Tina with me, and Rachel capturing us on film, but we brought an entire tour group along to do a course on Egypt in Egypt. I teamed up with Adept Expeditions, who handled all the logistics, and we had the most amazing time. NEXT, the proprietor of Adept Expeditions, came along with us. Right now, we are making our way across the desert by coach, over 3 hours from Aswan, through some of the most barren landscape in Egypt. Our adventure begins where Egypt ends, at the southern frontier of the Pharaoh's domain. This vast desert once swallowed up one of the world's greatest wonders. We're heading south to investigate an ancient Egyptian mystery, at a place called Abu Simbel, carved from the rocky cliffs along the Nile by Pharaoh Ramesses the Great over 3 millennia ago. Abu Simbel was clearly designed to impress and intimidate, but hidden behind its magnificence lies a puzzle. Why build such a monument so far from Egypt's heartland? And why did it vanish from history for more than 1,000 years? We're traveling there to look beyond the imposing edifice, to uncover secrets about Ramses' ambitions, his reign, and his mastery of illusion. Secrets to pull from the desert sands. The monument is an incredible historical record. Its walls preserve details about a great battle and one of history's earliest peace treaties, giving us a window into Egypt's relationships with foreign powers at that time. Today we travel there not just to ooh and ah at statues, but to understand a carefully crafted message from the ancient past. We checked into the Seti Abu Simbel Lake Resort, which I am to understand is the best place to stay here near the monument. We enjoyed a scrumptious lunch buffet provided by the hotel, with Egyptian fare and other goodies, which hit the spot after our long drive. Our rooms were these gorgeous bungalows right on Lake Nasser. I recommend you stay here if you come to Abu Simbel. Looking out across the lake, you'd think this was a waterfront property like many others, but just beyond the hotel lies a site unlike any other, and that is where we went next. FYI, we've classified all of our archaeological sites and museums in this series into categories. Category 1 means the site is large and has a lot to see, it's the top tier. Category 2 is middle tier, which means it's medium-sized, and then Category 3 would be a minor site. You'll see the category number come up when you see the name of the site on screen. The Nile is a narrow ribbon of life-giving water, cutting through an otherwise arid land. The land along its banks flooded every year, and gave life to the country. Together, these two zones, the green floodplain and the barren wilderness beyond, formed a stark duality. For the Egyptians, that contrast meant more than just the difference between fertile and sterile land. It represented a cosmic struggle between order and chaos. Abu Simbel was commissioned by Ramses II in the 13th century BCE, deep in what was then Nubian territory. It wasn't built in Egypt's heartland. It was carved into the frontier. Egypt controlled Nubia at this time. It was a message in stone. Ramses built monuments throughout Nubia as propaganda to reinforce his control over the people and their rich resources of gold, ivory, and ebony. This temple was dedicated to the gods Re-Horakti, Amun-Re, and Ptah.
So we got up at 3 a.m., got onto a little bus, took it to the Cairo airport, got on the plane, took an hour-and-a-half flight to Aswan, then we boarded another tour bus, and then we took that about 3.5 hours to come to this place. Why? Why go through all that trouble? Well, because we wanted to see this. The facade of the temple features Ramses II himself, seated, enthroned, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. And then if you notice by his legs, you can see these little people here. And these are depictions of his wife, his principal wife, Nefertari, his mother, Muttui, and Ramses' children, his 2 sons and his 6 daughters. Now, he ended up having more, but this will give you an idea of the time during his family life when the temple was made. It was when he still only had 2 sons and 6 daughters.
Each of the 4 statues of Ramses towers over 65 feet high. This was strategic. Ramses wanted those approaching from the south to be awestruck. He wasn't just a ruler, he was a god. You might think you're looking at the temple as it appeared 3,000 years ago. But you're not. This is the first illusion. And I'm not just talking about deterioration over time, the fading of the colors, the disappearance of the less durable parts of the temple area, or the desertification of the grounds. If you were looking at the cliff face back then, it wouldn't even be here. It was somewhere else.
Right down there, you can see the current level of the lake. But if we go underwater down there, you can see the original location of the temple. All they did basically was move it up the cliff face, and now it's back up here.
What am I talking about? There was no lake back then. It was just the Nile. But regular droughts and flooding that destroyed crops proved to be a major problem. And in the 1960s, the construction of the Aswan High Dam promised electricity and prosperity. But it also meant the rising waters of the newly formed Lake Nasser would soon swallow Abu Simbel forever. The world faced an impossible decision and pulled off perhaps the greatest archaeological rescue ever attempted. An effort led by UNESCO was launched, and engineers from around the world came together for a project unlike anything before or since. They devised a bold solution. Both temples here would be cut into massive blocks, some weighing up to 30 tons, and reassembled on higher ground, 200 feet, 65 meters, above their original location, and 600 feet, 180 meters, further inland. Every block was numbered, documented, and carefully sawn using diamond-tipped saws to minimize damage. The project wasn't just a technical challenge, it was also a powerful symbol of global cooperation. Over 50 countries contributed funding and support, uniting behind a shared commitment to protect the cultural heritage of humanity. The operation took nearly 5 years, from 1964 to 1968, and cost about $40 million, an enormous sum at the time. But the result was extraordinary. The temples were reconstructed with great accuracy. Even the broken statue on the facade was reproduced as it was. I have to say, what makes the rescue of Abu Simbel so inspiring isn't just the engineering brilliance, it's the recognition that some treasures are too important to lose. It set the standard for future heritage preservation, proving that with enough will and cooperation, we can save the past for future generations. The facade resembles the front of a temple pylon, but unlike a freestanding temple, it's hewn directly from the rock face. The 4 colossal statues of Ramses gaze eastward toward the rising sun. Above these figures runs a frieze of 22 baboons, each with upraised arms. These creatures, long associated with sunrise rituals, appear to worship the sun as it rises, reinforcing the temple's solar orientation and Ramses' divine association with Re. The seated statues rest on thrones, whose sides are carved with the Nile god Hapi, tying together the lotus and papyrus, the plants of Upper and Lower Egypt. But the statement doesn't stop there. Beneath their feet are carved the 9 bows, Egypt's traditional enemies, shown literally underfoot. It's a symbolic act of domination. The king not only unites the two lands, he tramples the forces of chaos. The Egyptians believed the balance between order and chaos had to be maintained. That was the role of the king. He upheld the order of the entire cosmos through his rituals and his proper behavior. It was understood that without the king, the system would fail. The Egyptian pharaoh connected the human world to the divine. His role in society was that of a god working for the good of his people. Every stone he placed, every shrine he furnished, was a deliberate act of ma'at, order, bolstering cosmic harmony while driving back the forces of chaos. The 19th dynasty pharaohs didn't want what happened to Akhenaten from the previous dynasty to happen to them. Instead of lessening their divinity, as he had done, they leaned into it. They made sure the people saw them as living gods, so no one would dare revolt. To drive the point home, these pharaohs erected massive temples across Nubia and Egypt dedicated to the cult of the living king. Inside and out, they fused the ruler's image with the gods, linking him directly to their temples and lining every sanctuary with big statues engraved with titles proclaiming his divinity. Standing here in front of Abu Simbel, it's hard not to feel humbled by the scale and ambition of the past. You can read about Ramses' achievements, you can see photographs and documentaries, but nothing fully prepares you for the awe that comes from standing here, feeling dwarfed by these statues, and inside hearing your own footsteps echo inside chambers carved by people thousands of years ago. But what really strikes me is how history isn't just preserved here, it's been actively reshaped, both by Ramses and those who came after.
You see this inscription of hieroglyphs here on the side? This commemorates the marriage of Ramses to a Hittite princess, which helped to solidify relations between the two countries, Egypt and the Hittite Empire. Very important historical document. You probably notice there's a lot of graffiti on the legs of Ramses here. And the graffiti is actually from ancient times, from after the time of Ramses. And this monument was visited by an expeditionary force sent by Pharaoh Psamtik I of the 26th dynasty. So this is several dynasties later. And it mentions that this force, was sent in 592 BCE, was led by Patasematawi, also known as Potasimto in Greek. And the men stopped here on the way to write their names, and it even mentions that men who spoke foreign tongues put their marks on here, and this would be like Greeks and Carians, they're from Anatolia, who were with the Egyptian army at the time. At the time they used mercenary forces quite a bit, and the men put their names and wrote things on the legs at that time to commemorate the fact that they were here at this temple.
In a niche above the central doorway is a statue of Re Horakti. He holds an User staff and the feather of Ma'at. This image is a cryptographic reference to Ramses' throne name, User Ma'at Re. Now we step inside and into a carefully crafted illusion.
Wow. So you can see here Ramses, 4 statues of him on each side, wearing the double crown. And he is dressed as Osiris. He's got the crook and flail that he's holding crossed on his chest.
The pillars and adjacent walls show Ramses making offerings to a host of gods: Amun-Re, Ptah, Osiris, Isis, Shu, Khnum, Sobekere, Horus, Anubis, Jehuti, Mut, and even to his own divine image. In these scenes, the king is depicted offering a small figure of the goddess Ma'at to the gods. Presenting her was a visual affirmation that the king was doing what he was meant to do, keeping the cosmos in order. But lower on the walls, the message turns violent. On the side walls, the king is depicted smiting enemies in the presence of Re Horakti and Amun. No image captured a king's sacred duty more starkly than the classic motif of the ruler, uplifted victorious, striking down kneeling foes, order's conquest of disorder. In relief after relief, the king is shown smiting enemies, hunting hippos, or casting nets for marsh birds. These aren't simple records of royal pastimes, they're deliberate enactments of the pharaoh crushing the forces of chaos. One narrative sequence on the north wall features scenes from the Battle of Kadesh. Ramses charges into the battle in his chariot, mowing down the enemy. Never mind that the actual battle was likely a stalemate. In this version, he is victorious and unquestioned. The poem of Pentar, as it's sometimes called, is a lengthy text that appears in several of Ramses' temples. It recounts in dramatic detail the events of the battle. The ceiling between the pillars is painted with stars, and the center aisle features the wings of the vulture goddess Nekhbet, protectress of Upper Egypt. Beyond the hall are two storage side rooms with depictions of Ramses before a range of gods: Hathor, Isis, Reharakti, Ptah, Khonsu, Amun-Re, and Ma'at. Further chambers include images of cult items and sacrificial animals. In another space, the king makes offerings to Mantu, Webwawat, and the Theban triad Amun, Mut, and Khonsu. Next comes a smaller pillared hall, originally fronted by two sphinxes, now in the British Museum. The further in you go, the more divine the space becomes, from the power of war to the quiet rituals of eternity. Here, Ramses and Nefertari are shown worshipping Amun-Re, Isis, and Reharakti, and presenting offerings to the divine bark of Ramses himself. In one scene, he offers lettuce to Amun and Isis, a symbol associated with fertility and regeneration.
You must be outside with Tina.
This leads into a vestibule, whose walls show offerings of wine, fruit, and flowers.
These are the three main gods, plus Ramses. He puts himself right in there. But you've got Ptah, and you've got Reharakti, and you've got Amun-Re, and then you have Ramses as well. Certain times of the year, October 22nd, April 22nd, the light from outside shines right into here onto the gods, but not on Ptah. And so some people think that was designed purposely to be that way because Ptah is the god of the underworld. It wouldn't have been appropriate. Could just be coincidence, but it's interesting that Ramses puts himself right in there with the other three on the same level. Those dates are not special, so we think, well, maybe they were like it's Ramses' birthday or his coronation day. It's just a guess because it doesn't seem like an important day. That's why it could be coincidence.
In the center of the space once stood a pedestal, likely used to hold a sacred bark. On the surrounding walls, Ramses is shown asking Min for soldiers, offering perfume to Amun-Min, and worshipping the bark of Amun-Re. The alignment in the original spot occurred on February 21st and October 21st, but after the relocation, the dates shifted by one day. Ramses did all he could to make sure this monument would stand the test of time, but eventually the sand won. Abu Simbel was abandoned and slowly buried. By the Greco-Roman period, it had disappeared from use and from everyone's memory. Back in March 1813, Swiss geographer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt made his way along the Nile cliffs here with little more than a camel and a guide. His goal was a little-known shrine locals described as magnificent, but to reach it, he had to descend an almost perpendicular cleft down a sand-choked ravine more than 100 feet deep just to lay eyes on its facade. But that wasn't this temple. It was one of the smaller chapels. It was when he climbed back up that he stumbled upon something even more astonishing. Buried in the drifting sands all the way up to their necks were the colossal heads of Ramses. Word of his discovery reached Giovanni Belzoni, a former circus performer turned explorer. Fired by Burckhardt's account, Belzoni hurried to Abu Simbel, only to have his first attempt at clearing sand end in failure. Undeterred, he returned in 1817, and this time stripped away the dunes to expose the buried entrance, opening the door for generations of archaeologists to come. Abu Simbel had returned.
We're now approaching the other temple, the smaller temple. This temple was dedicated to Ramses' primary wife, Nefertari. And here you can see images of both her and Ramses at the entrance. And one of the things you'll notice is that they're of equal height, which is very unusual because in those days it was customary for the wives to be a little bit smaller than the husbands to show their status compared to each other. But Nefertari is the exact same size as her husband, which has led people to wonder why. It shows that she was important, at least, if not to Ramses, then maybe politically. But for some reason, she wanted to be represented this way, and Ramses agreed to it. Or maybe it was his idea, who knows. But it shows the importance of Nefertari during his reign.
4 of the statues are of Ramses and 2 of Nefertari. Ramses is taller on the sides of the doorway, but if you notice the pairs of statues on the outside of him and his wife, they are of comparable height. Nefertari wears the vulture headdress and double plumes associated with the goddess Hathor, reinforcing her identification with divine femininity. Ramses, meanwhile, appears in both the white and double crowns. Flanking each statue are smaller figures of the royal children. Each figure is carefully labeled. Inside, the atmosphere is a bit different from the other temple. Where Ramses' temple shouts with power, Nefertari's whispers with reverence. The 6 pillars are crowned with the face of the goddess Hathor. On each pillar, Hathor is depicted as a woman in a close-fitting dress, holding a sistrum, her sacred rattle, in one hand, and the manat in the other, a symbol of divine protection and joy. The style of the reliefs is more elegant, more lyrical. Nefertari's figure is drawn with a grace rarely afforded to royal women.
Look at the lotus flowers that Ramses is holding before Hathor. This temple was just by chance easier to locate. Not as much of it was covered by sand.
The temple is not so much about her power, but about her presence. Nevertheless, this still is a monument to Ramses' power and to his queen's divinization through him. The walls of the pillared hall feature ritual scenes. Ramses is shown smiting enemies before Re-Harakti and presenting offerings to deities including Khonsu, Mut, and Amun. Nefertari, too, plays an active ritual role. She makes offerings to Hathor, Mut, and Tefnut, appearing not as a passive queen, but as a fully divine consort. At the back of the temple is the sanctuary. Here the central focus is a sculptural niche showing Hathor as a cow, emerging from the mountain itself. Beneath her head stands Nefertari, embraced by the goddess. As night falls, the story of Abu Simbel comes alive again, this time in light and sound. We were treated to a show. The storytelling is bold, the visuals are theatrical, but it fits. This place was always a performance. Staged not for tourists, but for the gods, for the king's enemies, and for travelers. Abu Simbel was a message broadcast in stone. I was here, I ruled, I endure. Even in this modern retelling, that message comes through. Abu Simbel makes me realize how desperately we want our past to survive, how far we're willing to go to keep history alive. In a way, I think that's what fascinates me most. Not just the mystery of the ancient Egyptians, but our modern determination to understand them, to save their legacy, and to connect ourselves with their story. It's a reminder that history isn't static. It's something we choose to maintain. Every generation, all over again. I can think of 3 ways Abu Simbel fooled the world. First, it was built to deceive, a monument of divine illusion designed to project power to those entering Egypt from the south. Second, it disappeared, buried for over 1,000 years, hidden from history, no one even knowing it was ever there. And third, it was moved, relocated stone by stone, and then convincing everyone that it never left. Ramses built Abu Simbel to outlast death. The world tried to bury it, the Nile tried to drown it, but here it stands. Maybe he won in the end. Our journey through Upper Egypt will continue. In our next episode, we will go to Aswan to see the stunning Greco-Roman remains on Elephantine Island, and to investigate the Old and Middle Kingdom tombs of the nobles at Kubet el Hawa at night. Stay tuned, and don't forget to subscribe.